So for the first paper in our panel this afternoon on challenging gender norms, quote unquote, we have Zinnia LaChance, who is a second-year art psychotherapy trainee at Roehampton University, and who will be presenting today their poster on the non-binary psyche, developing a theoretical framework for art psychotherapy. So I'll let you take it away.
Great, thank you. So as I said, my project is on the non-binary psyche, developing a theoretical model for art psychotherapy. This is a secondary qualitative research project based mainly on a literature review using thematic analysis within the concept of LGBTQIA/queer methodology. And the question I was trying to answer or embark upon the journey of is, does an art therapeutic approach address the needs of non-binary clients? So I'm going to start with doing a brief overview on what art psychotherapy is, because this is quite different from the other modes of study within this conference. So art psychotherapy is literally healing of the mind. So our job is to sit with the client and feel their experience as best as possible. And it's not a diagnostic experience per se, but it often can be used as such. And unfortunately, within working with psychology and psychoanalysis and being in that same realm, a lot of language, diagnostic and pathologized language is used within art psychotherapy that wasn't initially. This is language that we've had to adopt in order to be understood by psychologists that we work with. And art is used within art psychotherapy as a tool to describe what cannot be described through language. This is either by the client themselves as they're a child learning disabled or don't remember a lot due to trauma, or by language itself. So this is depth of emotion, being able to fully immerse yourself within the emotion and understand it. As well as dreams. Dreams are very hard and difficult to explain through language a lot of times, and then also terms of identity. Art psychotherapy is largely based off of the concepts of Jung, particularly within the Roehampton model, and this is based off of Jung's concept of dreams and the art that he would use in order to explain his dreams. And it's also based off of the concept of alchemy within the therapeutic relationship. So this is an idea of using the metaphor of alchemy in order to explain how within a therapeutic relationship, both elements are changed. This is both the therapist and the client, and both the therapist and client identities come together within the therapeutic space in order to create the healing. And it is the reaction of these two individuals coming together that is what creates this healing concept. So there's two concepts I'm going to be talking about within this study that are art therapeutic concepts. The first is the triangular or therapeutic relationship. This is the concept of the art, the client, and the therapist all coming together within the therapeutic space, and all of them affecting or being affected by the other. The identities of each person involved and how they perceive the artwork is an inherent part of the healing process. And the other aspect is the inner and outer frame. Typically, the outer frame is used to describe the organization or structure in which the therapist is working with it, and then the inner frame houses the therapeutic relationship. But this can also be used in understanding the context or the socially constructed space in which the client sits based on their race, gender, age, ability, class, all of those factors, versus their inner world and their psyche. We are just starting to somehow come into an understanding that these are not separate experiences and that they are impacted by the other, and that's a key element within my research. So I decided to do this research because there was very little discussion around trans and non-binary client work within my course. And even within a lecture designed to address context, power, and difference, The only reason that we ended up discussing trans and non-binary identities was that there were people in the course who identified as trans and non-binary. When I started doing this research, I was shocked at how little research there was, because I've worked in therapeutic spaces for a long time now, and I work mainly in crisis situations, and I have seen people who identify as non-binary, their cases being moved to wait lists because it is perceived as being a complication. Their identity is seen as being more complicated than people who identify as just male or female. And that is seen as complicating their case, even though what they're coming to us for is not gender identity difficulties. It is usually depression, anxiety, trauma. Along the lines of that, they're coming to us not for identity purposes, but for mental health difficulties. And I thought that it was not right that we were doing that. So I started doing this research, and I found mostly pathologized language, such as gender identity disorder, rather than referring to people by their pronouns or as non-binary. And that was recently removed, gender identity disorder, from the International Classification of Diseases by the World Health Organization, which is a really big step. It was removed entirely, and then gender dysmorphia / any sort of gender-related issues have been moved from sexual health to sexual health rather than it being in mental health. So this is the course that art psychotherapists within the UK are a part of, and we follow. So we have to listen to their abide by their rules, and so this requires us to look at our past treatment of non-binary clients and how we can best serve them now. Within this concept, I also wanted to make my search terms very clear. I wanted to include art therapy / psychotherapy within it, and non-binary specifically, because I found that when I looked for under the term trans as well, and transgender, because it is under the transgender umbrella, that non-binary experiences were often seen as outliers within those client groups, and their experiences would not be reflected in the research. So I ended up with 6 sources that I went through and found codes for, started finding connections, and then finding themes. And I found these main 3 themes of outer work, inner work, and then where they lie together. Just as I feel sort of gender lies from the sort of within the social, psychological middle ground. It lies in this gray area in which we are looking at things from an outside perspective, but also from an inside perspective. So within these themes, I have found a theme of suppression and repression, and also these themes that we can use to help support people in art psychotherapy. So I have found that a lot of people tend to use collage. So this is the mind working with pre-made materials. So you're taking your outside source and you are making it through your own personal psyche. These are also show presentation and symbols of gender being both sociological and personal. So it's really important that we zone in on what is the personal element of this, because we want to be able to best reflect the individual client's experience of who they are and what their difficulties are. This also includes group work, reframing the gender norm. People felt much more comfortable and confident in discussing their gender identity and if or how it relates to their mental health when they were within a space that was created by and for non-binary individuals. There's a emphasis on body image and the abstraction of the body. These includes terms such as body maps and self-portraiture. So these are art techniques that show the body, but not necessarily trying to make them authentic to real life. So these are things that you can use and abstract and make to fit how you see yourself or how you believe people see yourself. There are some themes around within the art practice of body, rebirth, gendered symbology, and mostly just exploration of self. And that is where art psychotherapy can be so helpful in dealing with the individual self and how that person sees themselves, and allowing a space for that particular individual to feel seen and heard by the therapist. This is all within the context of the fact that we need more education around it. We don't have a lot of research. There's not a lot of research within art psychotherapy to begin with, mostly from my experience, because art psychotherapists don't really like doing research. And then there's not a lot of research within that of non-binary identity. And so there's just a lack of crossover. And this leads to a lack of understanding, which then leads to a lack of care. And then if we are not caring for this community, why would they come to us when they need care? We need to be proactive about it and start to move beyond what we find as gendered symbology and gendered language within the field, and just start to go beyond a prejudgment level. That is what we are supposed to do. That is what our job is. But there seems to be a lack of a context within this. This is also especially within the UK. All of the research that I was able to find was in the US, Canada, and Australia, which is quite interesting due to those countries' indigenous groups having identities that are beyond the gender binary, and sort of going through and decolonializing that concept. And I just wanted to touch briefly on this image in the middle. This is a image that I made, and it is a self-portrait identity collage based on the research of one of the articles that I have researched, and this is of my personal identity. And within art psychotherapy, it is vital that we also discuss the therapist's identity. And so myself as a researcher, I'm still a therapist, and my identity still impacts what I am researching and how I'm researching it. And so I ended up, through this concept, discovering sort of aspects of my own gender identity that I did not necessarily think I was going to. I live in a gray area in general, based on my race, my gender, my neurodiversity, and my sexuality. And so I have a unique opportunity of being within the gray area that I so want art psychotherapy to be able to explore. And I think that we do have the tools for it. We just require more research. We require more open understanding of gender, and we require to let go of seeing somebody's gender identifier and letting that almost predetermine what we are looking for in the therapeutic room. We need to go in with less of a background behind it. We need to think, again, more like psychotherapists did originally before psychoanalysis and psychology started to really draw upon our techniques. And I would just like to say that within art psychotherapy, it is a very easy technique that you can take with you. We do a lot of art-based notes. So if you've noticed that you might have started to scribble on your notes today or at any point during your academic career, those are also important elements into what is happening in your brain at that moment. We do a lot of when we're just finishing with a client, rather than going straight into writing down the straight notes, the straight facts, we check in on with ourselves and our emotions by doodling or scribbling or having a reaction to that, rather than moving straight into that. So I think it's important to note that these are techniques that you can use today and you can use regarding your gender identity. And you can talk about them with your family and your partners and your and within your life, because art also gives us the opportunity to share what cannot be shared in other ways. And that is my time.
Wonderful. Thank you so much for such an interesting poster and presentation to go with it. I will just wait for Amy to hit the stop record. Or I'll hit the stop record.